Thanks so much, everyone, for coming. I've personally really enjoyed the conference so far. I've been a few times now, and I think it's great. So it's a real honor to be hosting this panel, especially because I get to kind of nerd out a bit and host about my favorite topic, which is human-centered automation. A lot of us work in the tech space, and a lot of us care a lot about the user experience. And human-centered or user-centered automation is, I think, a topic that should be talked about more. Certainly when technology does all this wonderful, amazing stuff, you know, computerized systems can help us with so many tasks, take things off our hands, recommend songs to us, you know, remind us about our appointments, all that stuff's so wonderful. We also need to make sure that we keep in mind what the user experience of that is. Do I feel like I'm giving up too much control? Can I trust this system that's taking this job off my hands? What if something goes wrong? How do I know what's happening inside the black box? All of these questions, we are the stewards of making sure that product teams pay attention to these sorts of things and to the emotional experience of using a product. So without further ado, we'll do some quick introductions, and then we'll get stuck into the juicy business. So I'm Madeline Page, or Maddie. I'm a user experience researcher at YouTube. I'm a psychologist by trade, so I'm a therapist as well, hence why I'm very concerned about emotion and trust and the sort of feelings of product. Dina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dina Baseso, Senior UX Researcher at YouTube for the Discovery team, which is basically the algorithm, the homepage, what you see on Watch Next. And I'm so happy to talk about automated principles today.
Brilliant.
My name is Iveta Hajdakova, and I'm an associate director at Stripe Partners. We are a London-based research and strategy agency, and my background is in anthropology, and I'm super interested in the impact of automation on human behavior, trust, and institutions, society more broadly, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh.
Hey everyone, I'm Sachin Kumarswamy. I'm a UX research lead at Meta Shops. So it's basically like a post-ad click destination that exists on both Facebook and Instagram. So I spearhead the research for those surfaces on Meta platforms. I've been an electrical engineer in my past life. Before I got turned into UX researcher, I do both quant and qual. So I'm a mixed methods researcher by trade. I have vested interest in this sort of like automation and recommendations based on any artificial intelligence or machine learning aspects as well. So we do that on our Shops platform for recommending relevant products for our users. And also in my past life, I've been working on the smart control systems, home automation and stuff like that as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. I'm sure you can agree there's like quite a wide variety of perspectives here to talk about the topic, which is really great. I want to start off by asking our lovely panelists what automation-based feature do they really love and what they love about it. And if you could change anything, what would you change? And to kind of set the scene, my favorite is my Spotify Discover Weekly. I'm a big music fan, and I find like learning about new music that I'm not familiar with was a really effortful task. I'm not naturally cool like a lot of people who just sort of stumble across the hottest new things. So I really appreciate being helped in that department. I just wish that I could tell its algorithm to not pay attention to like when I'm putting on music to fall asleep or in the bath, because it's really made my Discover Weekly a snooze fest. So yeah, that would be my only ask. Anyone who knows anyone's Spotify, let them know. How about you, Dina?
My favorite automation product, so not just a feature, is the Nest thermostat, because I am perpetually cold. That's why I have my scarf right here on stage with me. I actually don't usually have a specific feature enabled in most other products, which is location services. But for Nest, I do because I try to be really eco-conscious. And so I actually really appreciate that while I'm here in London, my thermostat isn't telling my heater to just operate while no one's there, and will instead turn on when it anticipates my arrival. But one thing that I wish it could do a little better is to help me understand small things I could do in my day-to-day to be even more sustainable.
That'd be great.
But I had a recent debate with my sister about this. We're on polar opposite ends of this. She does not want to be told to be better with her thermal regulation practices. She's like, no, I just want the heater on all the time.
Right, like don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I'm in control here.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
different perspectives.
My favorite is an app called Woebot, Woebot. And it's this application that is kind of inspired by cognitive behavioral therapy. It also uses artificial intelligence, I think. And you can have conversations with it. So it's like an automated therapist. And I used it after a breakup. It was an amazing tool. So, like when you hear people talk about the future and how everything will be automated, but then there will be this, we'll need the type of jobs that people will need to do will be care work and stuff like that. And I feel like actually my experience with this Woebot is so good that I almost think like, okay, but robots can do care work as well. It's amazing because you can tell that it's based on science, and also it has the way it talks to you is really sweet. It's not intrusive at all. It kind of asks you when you want to have a conversation with it. It's very gentle, and it also gives you different modules. So you learn over time. You basically kind of start understanding cognitive behavioral therapy, etc. And it also gives you funny jokes. And if you don't want to talk to it, then you don't have to talk. And it's, I love the fact that it's a bit funny. And yeah, I don't know what I would change, because the fact that I'm not using it, that I haven't used it since, is probably a good sign. So.
Nice. What are you, Sachin?
Yeah, I think it's not because I was part of the development team for UXLive, but I love the Hue ecosystem for home automation. So, I mean, in Black Friday, I also got a new Hue bulb as well. It was on offer. It cost like 50 pounds, but usually like 120 pounds or something. So basically, I love it because it just makes my life easier. When I want to call and it gets dark, I just give a command saying switch on light in my bedroom or something, and it's just I don't have to get up or switch it on or stuff like that. So it just makes my life easier. And you can also go to bed and then use that to switch all the lights in every part of your house. So it just makes that easier. And the great thing about it is you don't have to buy any big architectural stuff that you have to pre-think when you're building your house or when you're moving into a new house. It's just that you can always it's just a bulb, and there are advanced stuff as well that you can keep anywhere in your house, like a small pot. But mainly they are bulbs that you can retrofit anywhere in your house, basically at any point of time. It also works with all the other voice assistant system that's probably out there everybody's using, with Apple, with Google Assistant, Alexa, and whatever the leading technologies are. Part of the problem that I face while using this system is the interface and the voice command, the way you operate with that or where you interact with the system changes depending on what app you're talking to, what assistant you're talking to. The whole interface changes if it's Google. The whole interface changes if it's Apple. It becomes much more simpler, but then less control over different things that you would have rather had from the Hue app that you get with the system. Another problem with this is with voice assistant being one of the command center for controlling the system, it also adopts all the problem that voice assistant has. So I'm not a native English speaker, so I have to give it 3 to 4 tries to make it active. I mean, when I say switch on light, it's like, where do you want to go? It's like, what are you talking about? So the automation is great, but it's not without its flaws as well. And another thing that I would love to improve there is also there is no real learning component to it. It doesn't learn that Sachin is giving this command and doesn't learn from my way of interacting with the system. So that's also another thing. So there is no learning aspect to it. I mean, they have this automated system which sort of takes the light input as well. So if it's darker earlier, pretty much like in London, right? Half the year is pretty dark in the evening. So after 4, normally in the January time, it'll be dark. So it should adopt to that. So it does. You need adjustments, additional systems as well. But it's really hard to interact with those systems as well. So there's not enough control. The sensors are complex. I'm an electrical engineer. I can probably interact with that a little bit more. But I struggle with it because there is no transparency around all the controls that appears in that as well. So those are the 2 things that I really struggle with when I'm using this system as well.
That's really helpful, everyone, and there's some interesting themes in there, I think. The theme of helpfulness really comes out. Take some things off my plate, make my life more convenient, and give me emotional help as well, help me to feel kind of supported in that way. And also some of the issues with some of these are wanting a system to be a bit smarter. I know that you can learn from me, through my repeated behavior. Why aren't you learning what I want? And then also sort of, I know that you, the system, has something to teach me. Why aren't you teaching me about how to be more sustainable, et cetera? So I think, even just in these few examples, we can already identify opportunities, and these are the sorts of opportunities that can really help product teams to know where to go. That's if anyone agrees, just play a little bit of house music. I think one thing that a lot of users really struggle with, certainly in my research, and I wonder if you will reflect on some of the things that you've heard as well, this idea that automation sometimes feels like a black box. You don't know what's going on in there. How am I supposed to trust this system when I don't know what it's doing behind the scenes? And I'd love to hear from the panel about either as UX practitioners making the thing or as sort of end users. Is that something that you've come across? Maybe Iveta, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, so both, I worked on a project about dating apps, and also as an end user, I have plenty of experience. And that is, I think dating apps really show us the complexity of the system, but also, I guess there's another issue. It kind of shows that the automation is entangled with design. So the whole app, or various apps, just feel like, well, I really don't know how this works, and how dare you tell me that this person is the most compatible match or something, because I don't even know, So I feel like that type of, I just remember when these things started, everybody was really excited, you can meet people, it can facilitate connection, etc. But I think the fact that people don't know how it works, people don't know how other people use it, whether they're good actors, bad actors, etc. I think it really shows how kind of difficult it is, and how kind of you still have to use it, but you end up being a bit skeptical and kind of cynical, I think, and that's. I think that's quite problematic, and so somebody should study it.
Absolutely. How about you, Dina? Have you heard this black box thing, lack of transparency?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think generally, so I've done so many studies just on YouTube's recommender system. And for those who don't know, a recommender system can be on a multitude of apps, a dating app, Spotify, YouTube, the videos you see on your homepage, based off of some set of inputs from you, it recommends you stuff back. And so YouTube's video algorithm, right, the videos you see on your home feed are all based off of your watch history, your search history on the platform, maybe things you've liked. And this is generally well understood by our users, and every now and then there'll be that one random recommendation, and maybe folks in the room have felt this. Sometimes you feel maybe delight, sometimes you feel affronted, like, why am I seeing this video on my homepage? Because there's this understanding that what you are recommended is based off of what you've watched, what you've searched for, your likes, maybe what other people who watch the same creators as you, like their similar watches as well. But when you can't make that connection, it's really frustrating, and it's a breach of trust. And so it's a really difficult problem to try and provide more transparency around, because there's no single signal that is determinate for why a video is being shown to you. It's a multitude of signals coming together, and then after a calculation, it's ranked toward the top or wherever it is that you stumbled across it. We have tried some interventions to try and make more transparent why a recommendation might be shown. The problem is many of these interventions are through copy, through text, and maybe this is also familiar to groups who do research on just design in general, but people don't like reading. And so even if you provide an explanation, if people aren't going to read it, then is it really effective?
Yeah, and this is a problem as well. It's not only a lot of text and people don't read, it's also a lot of, frankly, quite boring text, talking about inputs and systems and stuff like that. I mean, you want to have transparency, but you also don't want to sort of take a course in computer engineering. Like, how do you strike that balance of being transparent but not overwhelming users with like too much technical kind of jargon? How about you, Sachin? Have you come across this like black box?
Yeah, sure. So I think number of times, I did a research back in my thesis as well. So sort of like exploring uncanny valley as we call it. So if it's like too familiar with you, so if you're getting like really tailored information for hyper-personalization, so to speak of, so that is also not that great. And there also calls for the question is like, how much of information that this system knows about me, that it's making such an interesting or very, stuff that is related to me so well. There is also the notion of like non-related stuff that you see as well. So people don't think of these things as an AI or somebody doing. It's more like a system. So I'm using this application, and whatever the stuff that I get is a result of my interaction with the system. That's the only thing that they know. But there are more degrees of freedom, so to speak, to this. So it's also about the kind of, you might have just seen one time a content, you consume that content, and then you might be getting repetitive recommendations on that. But users may not necessarily realize that. Their intention doesn't match with what the system is talking about, because they might have just seen, like, caught up in a moment. They're like, this is an interesting thing, but they don't necessarily want to see that over and over again. And that is where the black box question arrives. Also, it's probably like, they don't think it's like black box. We don't think as users it's a black box. They think of something like, this is like an irrelevant recommendation. And then when it becomes like too weird, like we call it like entering the uncanny valley, then that raises the question of transparency and a lot of questions in users' mind as well about the trust and credibility with the system as well. So yeah, that's like one of the outcomes of research. But there are ways to like mitigate that as well. So it's more about like the struggle between the control versus what we want to show as well. So there are ways to, as you just mentioned, like it's not easy to sort of like communicate this to users. It's like, here is what you did before, and that's why we are changing stuff. Probably not going to work so well. So Instagram, for example, does this pretty interesting stuff. So it's like an action. based aspect. So you're scrolling in your Explore. Your Explore is basically based on a number of different things that you do on Instagram. And then there is also like trending stuff that happen around the world as well. So it's a mix of both stuff. When you see too much of the things that you really are invested in, then it becomes sort of like an echo chamber, right? You don't have anything out of your interest to see. You probably might find it interesting. So what Instagram does is, as you scroll down quite a bit in your Explore, you get like a message which says, with recommendations, like, here is something that you might want to consider, which is not necessarily what is based on your previous interactions, but it's something people like you are interested. It's like a trending thing that's going on, so why don't you check this out as well? And that brings like a bunch of different stuff into it. And I find it useful as well when I feel like, oh yeah, it's too much of food stuff, by the way, on my Explores, like too much of food stuff. I want to check out something else, and that's how we sort of like mitigate it on Instagram.
Right, so wanting something that feels personalized but doesn't sort of keep you stuck in your bubble. That's really interesting. I'm wondering, I heard you say trust, and I think this is a huge thing. We all want our users to trust the things that we're making, right? Presumably. We all want to feel like we're ethical practitioners, and we build trustworthy stuff. And I think never is this more true when we're talking about automation and we're talking about computers doing sort of humans' jobs. I'm wondering, Iveta, what's your experience of sort of exploring this issue of control?
Yeah, so I worked on a project with Spotify that I can talk about. It was about recommender systems, and we wanted to understand how Spotify can help people who don't really know how to navigate music, and usually they would be people who listen to the radio because somebody else curates their music. So how could Spotify help people like that to discover new music or just, have a good experience? And something that we discovered was that because music is so complicated, you just don't know what the value of music is. You don't know what the value of a song that you're going to listen to is. And for people who are not familiar with music, this can be very intimidating. And basically, music becomes a very uncertain field to navigate, especially for people who are not confident in their listening. And what we found is that people basically need help in two ways. Like first, they need to trust the system that they're, and there are different ways, what you mentioned, queuing, like this is why we're recommending something to you. But there's also help that they need in terms of judgment. So that is previously, you would have, or still you have music charts or experts recommending you music. And the challenge is like, how do you automate this? How do you, and without actually imposing certain biases onto people, So some people might go with, I want to listen to what's popular, whereas other people want to listen to something that's unique, that nobody else will know. And so you have to navigate these different, not just different types of people, different types of music that they want to listen to, but you also need to navigate these cultural repertoires around how people want to relate to music. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really cool. And I like that spin on it as well, that there's this is a very multifaceted area that you can dedicate your whole life to and still be learning more stuff. I think that's really cool. Dina, how about you? Like, what's been your experience of like how transparency and control and these things can kind of help to build trust?
I think the topic of control, for me, and how I talk about it with my teams, is best understood on a spectrum with also providing really good implicit support for users. So there's implicit support so that things are automated. The user doesn't have to lift a finger. And then on the other end, it's user has control over their experience. And somewhere in the middle, we have this dialogue going on where there's assistance being provided, but most of it is automated. And we can't make all the decisions all of the time. That can feel really constraining. That can not foster trust between the user and the system. But we also can't give ceaseless control to the user as well. So for instance, like, let's just reflect on our own interests. They constantly evolve and change over time. And maybe what's most deeply seated in my mind as my interest, I actually haven't consumed a single video of in the past 6 months, year, longer. But I know it's an interest, but that's not what I'm on the daily interested in, right? And so in order to be adequately supported in my daily journeys, my daily experiences, I need something that's topically relevant and timely for me as I am today, which is why I can't make all of my own topical interests decisions. And so, yes, I think it's very important that when things go wrong, when a recommender system makes the wrong suggestion, or even when it's just slightly off, a user should be able to say, hey, let's pivot a little bit, or like, actually, like, this was really wrong, and give really easy, accessible ways for them to course correct. They can't be heavy lifts, and they also can't be busy work.
I love that. And I think there's sort of a bit of a theme again about that balance, like finding that balance between like a user not having to do everything, but having an escape hatch or being able to grab the wheel and course correct when things go wrong. Or like with transparency and making sure that we communicate what these systems are doing, like communicate enough to show that it's in their best interest and you're going to be good stewards, but not so much that you sort of overwhelm people with too much technical information. I think this theme of balance is really important in finding that sweet spot.
And if I can just
Yes,
add a little bit more, I think what's really crucial is the user be informed just enough such that they're not so in the dark about the process that they start making assumptions and building myths about how things do work, such that they resort to extreme actions, which are actually damaging to how the recommender system is attempting to support them ultimately. So, yes.
Well, that's exactly right. When there's an absence of information, users can feel like, well, what are you trying to hide? Like, if you're not telling me what's happening, then what nefarious things are you doing behind the scenes? So there is an assumption, I think an automatic assumption of a negative information if you don't say anything. It's a really good point. How about you, Sachin? What's been your sort of experience of this issue of providing controls with the right amount?
Yeah, I think like it's an ongoing tension when users are using this, any system with any automation in it. So as UX researchers and designers, when we are designing such a system, the primary thought that we get is, or we should be getting, is like the tension between the automation and the customization that we are going to enable to the users as well. And this is true for pretty much anything that we work on. So I work on the shops. We help like sellers set up shops on our platform. We also think about how much of it should be automated based on whatever the Shopify link or whatever the link that they provide to reflect all the catalog into our platform. And also like customization, if they want to like create new materials that they should be bringing into the platform and things like that. So there is always that thought of automation versus customization. Now, where does the transparency and trust play a role here is like how much, it's about relinquishing control, really. Like how much of a thought I should be giving if I'm letting the system to do my job for me, right? And then this has like multi-levels of implications. Like if it is like a digital system and I'm a consumer and it's for entertainment, probably the relinquishing control has a a shorter barrier or a smaller barrier to jump as well. It is still about privacy. It's still about like my whatever the stuff that I'm going to let go of if things go wrong. But then it becomes like exponentially bigger if it is something that is tangible to you. For example, if you're on a automatically driving car, or stuff like smart shavers, for example. Because I was working on a smart shaving system, and we have it on market now. So what it does is basically detects the pressure as well as the rotation motion and sort of like adjusts the speed of cutting force and stuff like that so that you get an optimal shaving experience, right? So when we're doing research on this, people love the idea. And then when they start using it for some time, if the setting is not right, because we are saying like the system determines what's right for you, and you can really trust the system to make the right decision, but not everybody's face is same, the textures are different, the beard thickness is different, there are a number of different things that goes into it. So a lot of people experience like cuts and bruises because of like more cutting forces or a lot of pressure that are applied on their face and things like that. So now they don't know how to change this because it's like an automated system, right? And shavers don't even really have any control on them. So you have to use an app to like talk to it. And then you have to learn or master the whole new thing which did not exist before. And this is like technology getting really ahead of where the system is. So again, like transparency is key, but how much we promise to users is really important. We should be careful about we are not overplaying like the smartness that we have in our shavers. We should, in this case, or this applies to pretty much any system. So I think like the balance between the customization and automation, even if it is like completely automated system, like getting that aspect into the discussion, there is a customization option, you can control, there is an exit path that is built into the system. If things go wrong, right, you can actually like stop that. People just wish like there was a button which made this automated shaver a normal shaver because I don't care about these things, right? So there is also that aspect that plays into it. We have fixed all that. Now the shaver works really great. No longer part of the company, but it works really great now. So this, as I mentioned, like as the the impact is really high if it is like more tangible to your lifestyle and how whether you are in it or like whether you're just a user who is interfacing with that.
Love that, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, Sachin, because I think sometimes we can wear rose-colored glasses about our products and the things that we're working on, but like anything with automation has a failure rate. And if we pretend that it doesn't, we do ourselves and our users a disservice. So I think handling errors gracefully in design is really, really important. In fact, it's one of the chapters in there's the People and AI Research PAIR, P-A-I-R. That's a Google-based but externally facing guidebook on how to do human-centered automation well. And there's, I think, 6 chapters, and one of them is handling errors well. You know, when things go wrong, how do you design for that in a way that's going to hopefully kind of maintain trust and goodwill between the system and the user? So I'm really glad you brought that up. That's awesome. You also talked about self-driving cars, and I think that is a really good kind of test of where people sort of sit on this level of, trust in an automated system. And I'd like to do a little bit of group participation, if you don't mind. I'm always interested when we talk about technology to just like have a little eye out for generational differences. So if you feel comfortable doing this, if you don't worry about it. But can I have a show of hands of our Zoomers out there, the Gen Z and younger? Do we have Gen Z and younger? Okay, couple of very, very cautious. You should, man, I would be so proud if I was that young. Of those who are Gen Z. Keep your hand up if you would get into a self-driving car. Okay, a few of you.
Got 75%.
About 3/4, okay. Now let's hear from the millennials. Hands up. Okay, quite a few millennials, myself included, elder millennial. Keep your hand up if you would get into a self-driving car. Okay, quite like a few more, I would say 50-50.
Did you keep your hand up?
That one. My hand's half up.
What is this?
It's here. I'll comment more about that in a second.
Okay.
Gen X's hand up. Of the Gen Xers in the room, keep your hand up if you would get into a self-driving car. Oh, I think pretty much all of them stayed up apart from one. Okay, interesting. So it seems like there was higher percentages. Wait, oh, sorry. Hands up if you're in the baby boomer generation. Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anybody.
Self-driving car? Yeah.
You would? We've got a roving mic, and I'd love to hear more like qualitative responses from you all about that in a second. But I think it seemed like there was maybe this isn't very scientific, but maybe a U-shaped curve in willingness to get into a self-driving car. It seemed like there was perhaps more appetite in the Gen X's and the Gen Z's than in the millennials. I'm wondering, for our panelists here today, like how do you feel about whether you'd get into a self-driving car and what would be the conditions upon which you'd get into one? Iveta?
I don't drive, so that would actually give me some more options if I could like be driven somewhere.
Great.
Yes.
No fear, just straight in. Iveta's like, yup, sign me up. Love it.
I would assume that it would kind of know more than me and be able to drive in the UK as well. So yeah, I think that is actually my only option as well.
I think that brings up a really good point that when you're using something that's automated, if the system can do it better than you and you're very aware of that, then perhaps that barrier to entry is a little lower. How about you, Sachin?
Yeah, I think like there is a bit of a starting problem with the driving cars, self-driving cars. I would love to, like, I mean, I'm not a great driver or anything, so yeah, take me anywhere. I'm all up for it. But the only thing is like, what is the interaction with these cars, with the cars which are driven by humans, right? Like, how does it actually interact with that? Maybe like, it's human error that causes the accident because 100% of the car accidents are probably because of some sort of like error, right? Either by system or by human, right? Now the system errors are not going to go away. Error caused within the system with the driving cars. Maybe like we learn better and improve that. But at least we are saving maybe like all the human errors that are possible. Maybe that can be thwarted with improving these driving cars. So that makes me feel a bit safer. However, it is still more than, I mean, let's say like a lot of the other cars are driven by humans. So will I really be like safe by sitting inside the self-driving cars? So that's my only like concern at this moment. So if I would probably feel a bit more safer, like if a lot of people are like using self-driving cars, then probably there is a system which can communicate, between those self-driving cars as well to avoid any accidents and things like that. So that's my only, I would say, reservations of getting into it.
I totally get it, and I think like I've certainly heard this a ton in my research, where Sachin brings up a great point that statistically it would likely be safer than a human driver, right? But performance of a system is not all that's needed to get a user over the line to use something. And that's what we need to keep driving home, that even if the system does it better, that's not where the thinking stops. How about you, Dina?
Well, I think while I'd get into one, it would not be my preference. Mostly because I love public transit, but I think where a car has public transit beat is convenience. And so if I didn't have to own the car, if I could just momentarily rent it, that would be great, because I also don't want to own a car. I would probably only take it during the daytime. I feel like there was some very early bad news around its ability to sense things at night that may have, gotten to my brain. Whether it's actually grounded in real data or not, who knows? I don't know anything about the technology, to be honest with you, but I'd like it to be during the day if I did need to take hold of a escape hatch. if something did happen, though I agree with Sachin. I think like it would probably be a lot better than me because I will be multitasking because that's what I love about public transit. I can be going somewhere, someone else is driving me, and I'm like reading a book, or maybe I'm sketching, or
Yes.
learning a language.
Okay, so there are like certain conditions or extra value adds that you would need to be present in order for you to kind of be enthusiastic about getting a self-driving car. Yeah.
The biggest one being I don't want to own it.
Yes, got it. And I think this is like, again, sort of very important for us to kind of keep in mind is what value are we offering here? If Dina's living in a town where there's really good public transit and she doesn't want to own a car, should we really be investing in that if we're the self-driving car makers? So yeah, I think there's also a takeaway of just because we can doesn't mean we should. So if you're working on a product that, we could apply automation to this, have a think about what value are we actually providing? What unique value by automating this are we providing? And make sure that there's evidence that it's going to be a net positive for the user, because it is a really heavy lift and it's quite a complicated space, and you want to make sure that you're providing real value.
Why was your arm halfway up?
Oh, yeah, my arm was halfway up, wasn't it? I think I would like to see it being more widely used by more people for longer before giving it a go.
You want more guinea pigs?
Very much not an early adopter, which is rare. Most people who work in tech, I think, are early adopters, but I still use like a highlighter, like physical, with my notes and stuff. So, I'm very old-fashioned in a lot of ways. So yeah, I just want it to be out there a bit more first. Yeah. Well, we're going to open it up to some Q&A from you all now. And it doesn't even have to be a question. It can be a comment, and we can all kind of riff off it. So anyone got something to say? Got over there.
So many.
I think someone might come with a mic. Oh, great. Excellent. Thanks.
Big responsibility, absolutely big. And it's a duty that a recommender system has to also be equitable in whose voices are being raised. So not just content format, but who's speaking, because we want to try our best to dismantle some of the biases and systems of oppression that happen offline, right? Like they should not also be occurring online, because we bake in biases to the things we build, right? But yes, I do feel there's a very strong responsibility by recommender systems to responsibly recommend, knowing that this does shape the creator landscape and how creators think about their opportunities for their content to be seen. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think there's also we were talking before about the viewer experience. Like viewers, we know that personalization is sort of here to stay, right? And people want to feel like highly resonant content like reflected back at them. But most people don't want to stay like really stuck inside that tiny bubble. So viewers also want that sort of broader exploration opportunities as well. So I think it works it benefits creators and viewers to have systems that aren't so echo chambery like you were talking about.
It's one of our top user problems, stale recommendations.
Can I add something to that? So there's also this idea, and I think, Sachin, you mentioned it, that recommender systems work on this an idea that people like you will like content like you. And that's actually not so true. Like there's a scientist who specializes in this. Her name is Wendy Chan. You might want to check her out. And she talks about this bias around what she calls homophily. So it's this thing around like people like you will like things like you, but she actually says, you know, there is something like heterophily. You actually might like things that people not like you will like. And it's very interesting that there's this, that there's not enough awareness that this might also be a paradigm around how recommender systems work. And another thing that she also talks about, and I think it's relevant to this topic, is how do we even think of humans? There's, of course, because we have data science, we often think of humans as as creatures of habit, because habits is what systems can pick up. But, you know, to your point, we also want to learn. We also want to break out of our habits and change things. So I think that's something that we really need to figure out. Like, how do we even think of humans holistically?
There is also this matter of this, what we call, I mean, we use this term pretty frequently at Meta. We call it serendipity. So it's also like, unlike you, like it's so unlike you, whatever the stuff that you're interacting with, but how do you like surface those moments of serendipity while you're like browsing on our platform? So that's also a challenging part, and probably like the answer lies somewhere in what Iveta just mentioned. Like it's probably like something that is unlike you. Like I never knew that I would get into Korean drama series like before I started getting into it. Because it's not like me at all to watch like soap opera kind of series. But I just like discovered it's a whole new world of entertainment, and I really love that. So now the reliable way of getting into it is like probably like peer-to-peer recommendation from your friends, or it probably like you read it in a media somewhere. That it's like an interesting thing. There is the series out there and stuff like that. But how do we make it natural when you're like interacting with a system as part of the recommendation that we provide? There is like a huge problem to be solved there. And day by day, it's like getting interesting. The technology is like really advancing well, and there are like hundreds of different algorithms that you can use for recommender systems. And also depending on the media that you use as well. Like it could be like image recommendations or media recommendations or like text recommendations. There's so many things out there as well.
It's really cool, thank you. An excellent question, thanks very much for that. Anyone else got a question?
So many.
Got a couple, a few. You, I don't know, who you choose. Oh, who's my favorite? No, just whoever, I don't, eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Sorry, it's so awkward. Okay.
Oh yeah. I'm Flo, I'm from read.co.uk. Great discussion, by the way, really interesting. I have a question that's maybe more of a slight edge case. I have a few people in my life who are quite mistrustful of, you know, data, giving up their information, things like that. So I guess the question is, how would you convince them to trust the system, or do we kind of leave them to it and they don't get involved in it?
It's a good question. I know, like Google has been doing heaps in this area of late. I know if you kind of go into your settings, you have actually quite a lot of control about what data is retained and for how long and all of that sort of stuff. I'm not sure of the usage of that. Again, I think it's one of these issues of like, it can be like an effortful task to kind of manually sort of go in and tweak your sort of data retention settings, so maybe people don't do it, but.
Definitely there's a lack of awareness of the depth and range over the extent of controls that someone can have over their data. So certainly, if someone is completely distrusting of a system and they don't want any data to be collected on them, that is their right. We respect it. We also provide alternative lengths of durations of data retention. So What if you're just interested in your last 3 months of interests, for instance? That is a completely different picture of a person than, say, a year's worth, 2 years' worth, and beyond the retention period, it's not maintained or documented anywhere in the system. So we do provide, I think, different tiers of data retention, along with all the levers and buttons that people can, to more fine-tune their data retention. But if it's the holistic image of like, oh, you can identify me, you can piece me together, we have some means of working within a personalized system.
And I wonder also, like, when you're saying, some people in your life who are very cautious about data, and I've got people in my life like that too. And I think sometimes it's okay for people to not use things if they don't want to, like that's also okay. And I think also when we were talking about like the benefits, right, like is what this system is about to do for me so beneficial that I can tolerate some discomfort knowing that this system knows something about me? This sort of trade-off that we all make in our lives of like, I'm entering into this sort of transactional relationship with this system, and how do I feel about that? Anything to add from either of you about that?
I listened to a podcast by Tim Berners-Lee around this idea of the third layer, where each person will have like their own, I don't know what, pod or something of information that you would just, if you would consent, like, okay, I'm going to create a contract with this provider and I'm going to share my data, but I think the idea is that you would own it and you would decide what to do with it, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think like there are different levels of like solutions to this as well. So one, what a company can do when we are providing such services, what an individual can do when they're using those services, and also like surrounding all this, what governmental organizations are talking about that. I don't think we talk about this enough, but there is GDPR in the Europe region, and there is also like regulations on how data retention is handled and stuff like that. That actually helps with also like representing the voices of the citizens of the region as well, but also for the best of how people use the system as well. So there is that aspect, which is also like taken a big turn nowadays, and it's become like a big deal as well, which is rightly so. It helps with this helps companies also to navigate through these aspects in a way that it is useful and transparent to users as well. So now that what companies can do, I'll talk about that later, but what users can do, I think like we should encourage when users are first time using our system, or if they are already into our system, just remind them that there is such a policy updates and stuff like that. So stuff that we do is like privacy checkups, right? Then actively take part in those things to like relearn like how much of an information are you sharing, what are the terms and conditions, how is it being used, and things like that. So the answer really is like, as you just mentioned, it could be a pessimistic viewpoint where you can say like, it's up to you if you want to use the system. There is also like optimistic viewpoints, like here is all the terms for using our system. Now you be the judge whether is it okay to use the system despite all the stuff that we have mentioned in it. And the problem is people don't read stuff. So how many of us like read the whole privacy checkbox when we are like signing up to a system in its entirety, right? And we cannot say like it's your problem that company is like hiding stuff and you're like putting in a big list of things as a legal aspect. So it's partly something to do with the companies as well, because we need to like make sure the most important information are upfront and users know what they're actually signing up. So not hiding behind the legal aspects and legality of those things. So that's what companies can do. But what user can do is also like actually partake in these efforts that government as well as companies are putting in as well. So both of us are stake, but obviously like there should be more effort from the companies to handle this, because yeah, it's our system that you're using and you're a user, and that's what we serve for.
think that's really interesting. Great points, everyone. I think we've got time for one more.
I have the mic, so.
Great.
Thank you very much. I was really intrigued by Veta's, sorry if I didn't pronounce your name right, but earlier you mentioned that you sort of sought emotional support from an application. And I was really intrigued. I would wonder how much of sort of shared experience or human empathy do you think is important in creating trust?
That is a great question. So in this particular instance, and I thought about it because, so I'm not sure where empathy would sit. Like, I don't know whether it was empathy that made these creators utilize jokes. You know, like, I don't know where that came from, the joke side of things. But but you can, I felt like you can almost, I don't want to say avoid, but the fact that cognitive behavioral, or how cognitive behavioral therapy works, it has some kind of universal understanding of the way people, I mean, Maddie, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a psychologist, but it has some kind of universal understanding of the relationship people have between feelings and thoughts. And that is so helpful to, if you have a system that kind of corrects you or helps you be aware of this. And I actually thought about it also when I had COVID, and I wasn't sure like why my symptoms were so strange. And I was thinking at that time, if I had a system that would really tell me people who describe your symptoms in this language also say that they are fine like in 5 months or something. You know, like that kind of, it's not empathy, it would be more just not feeling alone and knowing that I'm not alone experiencing it, I'm not alone articulating my symptoms in the way that I am. And I thought like that would be so beneficial, but I wouldn't call it empathy, I would just call it kind of a crowd-sourced awareness.
Yeah.
Just made that up.
And that's beautiful, yes.
Related to what you said, informing you, the app was informing you about what to do. And did it also encourage you to get information for yourself? Like, look, this is what people said and blah, 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 but make sure you get information from different sources, make sure you don't get information for yourself as well.
With Wobot.
Yeah, recommend about, okay, make sure you get your own information as well. Not that, don't trust us, but think for yourself as well.
Yeah, I don't remember whether that was there, but you could do like different modules. So the learning bit was definitely empowering. And also, I should say that if you like used certain keywords, then it would tell you to call a number, or it would tell you to speak to a therapist, and etc. So it was more, it was more complex and, yeah, really good, I think.
That's great. Well, thank you all so, is that right? Yes. Thank you all so much for your attention and for your participation.